Yeah, everybody, we're back. Body movement. We do these on our own time. There's no cadence here. We write our own rules, Allison.
Yes.
We're back.
We sure do.
Episode
Story of our lives.
Yeah. Episode 30. We're in early July. Wimbledon just happened today. Djokovic won his seventh Wimbledon. British Open coming up this week. They call it the Open Championship now, but it's the British Open. It will always be the British Open. Beautiful summer day down here in Connecticut. Hope it's the same in Saratoga.
Yep. Getting ready for track season.
Track
2 days
season
away.
Starts 8 days.
Thursday.
Oh, so good.
Yeah.
I'm coming up.
Yep.
Bet on some ponies, get outside, maybe a stogie, celebrate the good times. But we'll still keep moving our body and remaining healthy and preaching all the good habits that we try and preach here.
Do the things.
Okay.
All right.
So here we go. We're going to give this a go.
Okay.
Episode 30. We have a very special guest and a very special topic. We're talking about framing injuries and pain. And we're going to be doing a little bit of the difference and similarities between adults and children. And to help us set this all up, we have a very special guest that I'd love to bring onto camera. Our beautiful daughter for Allison, niece to Uncle Matt. Where is she? Julia Jordan Davis.
Say hello.
Hi.
Hey, welcome to the show. How you feeling?
Good.
Why are you on the show today, Julia?
Because I need to talk about what happened to my arm.
And what happened to your arm?
I broke it.
Oh my goodness. And let me ask you this. Who was watching you when you broke it?
My Uncle Matt.
Who's that guy right there?
Right here. Here
What
I
were you
am.
guys doing?
We were like sitting on the deck, and then Uncle Matt got an idea of jumping off it. And we did it once, and then the second time I fell when I was jumping. I was like trying to jump, but I slide. So I was trying to show my brother Austin.
You know, and you fell off the deck and you fell right on your face, didn't you?
No, it fell right on my arm.
I know.
Fair enough.
Yep. And I saw it. And did you, how did it feel? Did it hurt?
It's kind of like a mix. Not really, and it did.
Okay. So
tell us what it felt like when it happened.
Yeah. How'd you feel?
Did you feel it? Did you feel it do anything? Did you feel it break?
No, I only felt it like hit it really hard.
Okay. So, and maybe it also, did you get a little scared?
Not really. I kind of knew I wasn't gonna do that, but instead I did.
Yeah. And then what happened? How did we know that it was broke? What, Uncle Matt came over and made sure you were okay, right?
Yeah.
Gave you a little hug. And then you're like, I don't want to be near you right now, Uncle Matt. I'm going to go up to my room and cry on mommy's shoulder.
So tell us what happened. What did so you were sitting outside?
Yep.
And
get her in the camera a little bit.
Yep. She keeps moving on me. So you were sitting outside, right? And you fell, and Uncle Matt was trying to talk to you, right? So what was he saying to you? Do you remember?
No, it was a bit of a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. Okay.
Yeah, so I was asking, I was touching your arm, and I was asking, does that hurt when I touch right there? Does it hurt if you move it? And then I just said, I don't think it's broke, but I know that you hurt right now. So I was just giving you a hug, but you were like, I want to go upstairs and talk to mommy, right?
Yeah. So then I was sitting in the living room, and Julia came kind of storming through, went right through everybody, went right upstairs, and then was sitting on her bed, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so when I went upstairs as mom, I saw her and PT, right? So I saw her holding her arm tight, like self-splinting is what I would call it.
Yeah. So that's a good sign, right? If a kid hurts their arm, if they're kind of doing something natural that just feels good to them.
Right. So if you think like, when you hurt your arm, you get put in a sling, right? Like that's naturally where we go if you hurt your arm or hurt your shoulder. So from my eyes at that point, I knew she was splinting. And then my thing with kiddos is you ask them to move. So because if it's a break, they're not going to move. Where, how many times have my kiddos bonked something and I said, can you move it? And they're like, no, it hurts. And they're moving everything everywhere all over the place. And that happens often. So that splinting sign was number one. For me, kind of the look in her eyes from a mommy way of, this isn't the normal look of pain in the way she was talking.
Right.
Can you wiggle your fingers? She wouldn't do that. Can you straighten your arms? She wouldn't do that. Can you lift it up? She wouldn't do that. So I said, do you think it's broke? And what did you say?
Yes.
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 So we said, okay, off we go to get x-rays, right? Okay. So that was how we got to the point of injury happens to we need to go to the doctor now.
Yeah. And what did they do at the doctors? Did they take any pictures of you? X-rays?
Yep, they took x-rays. But when they took the x-ray, when I went to go and see it, I didn't really see it. I thought it was like at the start. I thought that was the crack, but it wasn't. It was
Hold your arm up and show the camera. Yep.
It was at the starting of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't really see it because it was so whitey. I couldn't even see it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it wasn't a big break, right? It was very tiny.
Nope, but it did break both of my bones.
Yep. So she broke both her distal radius and ulna.
Yeah.
They were all in a good place, so they were still in line.
They weren't out of place. They weren't here.
Right.
Right.
Or they weren't here.
Yeah. So
yeah. It was right on your wrist, right? It was right on your two sides.
How did it feel when they were trying to take the x-rays?
It felt a little painy when I had to move it a little bit. But other than that, it felt a little better. But it mostly hurted.
Do you remember why it hurt to move it? Why did we talk about? What was the reason why it hurt to move it? Why does your body hurt so bad when you have a broken bone?
Because it hurts so bad.
Mm-hmm. It does. It just hurts, huh? So why does your body create pain? Do you remember what we talked about back then?
No.
Does your body want to move the broken bones, or does it want to what? Protect them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the pain in that scenario is very protective, because if you have a broken bone, and this goes for anybody, that typically, unless you are being chased or there's some other context to it, it will hurt. And that's because your body wants to protect that and not move it. So it's a good thing to have pain.
Right.
It's a good thing to have pain in that scenario so that you don't damage things further, which is something.
Is that, again, Uncle Matt was just trying to do a general assessment. Let's say you're watching your kids, or, they fell off their bike, or they were playing in the driveway and just took a bad spill playing basketball, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we as adults, and I'm certainly go, hey, just try and move it this way, try and move it that way. And is that
Put
good?
some dirt on it, get going, right?
Yeah. Or just like, hey, again, when I was doing it, I was just like, does this hurt? Does that hurt? I was just trying to touch her in various places where I knew she fell on her arm, where she said it hurt. Is that going to tell me anything if I'm not an expert though? It's just like,
I mean, I think in the situation of a broken bone, you could feel something at times, but for the most part, I wasn't going to feel those breaks in her.
Right.
I wasn't going to feel them. They were small.
Right.
I mean, if I tried to wiggle her, might I have felt something shift? Yes. Yeah. But at that point, with the other signs of splinting and all of that. Yeah. So, I mean, I think as a parent, you look and say, there's two paths, right? There's, oh my God, you poor thing. What happened every time you get hurt? And that's how a lot of people respond. And then there's, you're fine, move on. And eventually, if something's bad, we go from there. Now, as an interesting scenario, her brother, who we wouldn't bring on this podcast, is
Austin.
Yeah, Austin hurt his foot that day. He was at a trampoline park and he turned his ankle and he was crying really hard. So he got up and he was walking and moving. And I looked at him and he was fine. So he was hurting a little bit, but he got up, he played, he went through the day.
Yeah. Right.
So in that scenario, I wouldn't, I was like, okay, he's all right. Later that day, he was complaining, and that morning he was complaining. So I reached out, to an orthopedic guy I knew, and I was like, look, I can't confirm in my head if this is broke or not.
Yeah.
It was still bothering him the next day. He was limping, he was upset.
Yeah.
So we went and had an x-ray and it was negative.
Right.
It was sprained.
Yeah, it was
just probably sprained. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So, so again, you're a pro, you can kind of spot these things a little bit more than the average parent. So I think in most cases, I think just bringing them to urgent care is never going to be a bad idea, just to check it. Or do you?
No, if like, listen, like in your gut, if you think there's a broken bone, like go, that would be the one thing I'd say is go. Yeah. I do think though we do, as a medical professional, we have to be a little conscientious of how much we image people. It's exposure to radiation. There's a lot to that. So there should be rationale to image, not just image to ease your mind. Right. So, yep. For me, like if that child had come to me and with the mechanism, I would have sent him for x-rays as well. Right. Just because he was limping with weight bearing. He generally like bounces back from things. Like there were certain things about that I just had to confirm in my mind that wasn't there.
Yep.
But, so it's you don't want to just necessarily jump right to that. And then you also have to think about, it's hard. It's a hard decision because then you have to think about what does that mean every time they get hurt, right? To their psyche. Like as an adult, every time you bonk your arm really hard, are you going to run to the urgent care? Right. You're setting, I think part of like what I want to talk about today is like, how you respond to injuries and the words you say to kids not only impacts them as it does adults when you talk about pain in certain ways or conditions in certain ways, but it sets them up for the future of what it looks like for them and how they're going to respond with hurt.
It's competing ideologies. Because we've talked about this, actually, we talked about it on the podcast we had with Matt Bedreau in education. And your kid falls and hurts, you're actually going to turn your back to him and you're not going to rob them of that experience. I'm quoting him almost verbatim. You're not going to rob him of that experience of getting up on his own, dusting himself off, and then learning and then assessing himself. Hey, I'm still hurting mommy or something like that. Right. Versus other things we talked about with nocebos or chronic pain. You're like, we're always talking about usually the chronic pain or something that built up over time, but you're like anything that's acute, you take more seriously and engage in the healthcare system that we rip so often. It's just a different thing, right? So there's got to be a story to it. I mean, she fell on her arm, right, from a height. Yeah. Jumping with her 41-year-old uncle. Just kidding. It's fine. I would be jumping with her too. We all know this. Yeah. So it's debatable if I'm 41, by context, the way. Right? Now, if she was running around with you all day and there was a moment in the day that she bonked her arm and later that night she's complaining about it. Yeah. And not taking her then, right? So it's contextual. It's all of that. Versus like a great example is like low back pain. Like when somebody has like bends forward or sneezes or lifts something and has low back pain in the presence of no red flags, without red flags. So numbness, tingling, increased severe weakness in the leg, they should not get an MRI. Right. They shouldn't get an MRI. That actually can significantly impact their long-term outcomes. So, you as a medical professional, you have to step back and hear the story, take it into account of what's happening. Yep. A first-time low back pain patient who gets an MRI showing a disc herniation is going to have a worse long-term outcome. Yep. So I think I'm as the layman here on the podcast that just tries to curate the best information from the patient side. Something acute, especially with the kids, is, and it goes to everything you do with your patient. Everything's a sample size of one. This is why the healthcare system is broke. We have all these scalable things, get them in, get them out, do this test, do that test, do that test, and we'll likely find something. And oftentimes it's the wrong thing or leads you down the wrong path. And that's why there's all these problems of misdiagnosis and big pharma and all that stuff. Conversely, there's the common sense route of N of 1. So when your kid falls, when they're experiencing a problem, if they're crying, if they took a fall, take everything into account. Just be a big boy, be a big girl, be a responsible adult. Be like, oh, she fell from a distance that is not safe.
Right.
On her arm.
Right.
So it's probably broke. Versus your son, my nephew, who hurt his ankle doing nothing not that high impactful, especially compared to the fall that Miss Julia took off the deck. So when he had something more mild and was able to tough it through the day, you needed that 24 hours, 48 hours of monitoring before you took that decision to like get it checked out.
Right. So, and, and to your point with, the pain experience for a kiddo, I agree, there's this line as a parent, right, of be empathetic and be there for them and then let them have the pain experience and get through it.
Right.
I don't know who I was talking to, but it was a recent conversation of, when my kids fall, depending on how it looks, if they were learning to ride their bikes and they, went off to the side on the grass.
Yeah. What
I do is what I've seen it is I do look away. I look away and this is great. I look away and I wait, because if they make eye contact with me, they're going to start crying and run to me. Right. So I turn, I wait, and then I listen. And if there's crying, then I turn around and I say, are you okay? No, whatever. And then I'll assess it and move from there. Yeah. And then, my conversation depends on what severity it is. If it's a huge scratch, I'm like, oh my gosh, if it's, like, oh my gosh, that hurts. I know, we're going to calm it down. We'll get you, we'll figure it out. If it's, a little something you don't see, and be like, okay, settle down, and, there's a different tone based on what I get to when I get there. Versus,
and again, I can't always speak to it as a full-time parent, but I'm around your kids enough to know, when Julia took that fall, I ran right over to her. Right. Yeah. Versus I've seen the show. I've seen the show in Saratoga, New York, between Julia and her two brothers. And a lot of times you guys get hurt and cry, but actually you're okay, aren't you? Usually.
Are you usually okay when you get bonked and hurt?
Yep.
Yeah.
What was different about when you got hurt, when your wrist got hurt compared to other injuries?
Like if you
she's sitting on a rolly stool, so we might have another injury on camera. Okay, so what was different about when you hurt your wrist versus other injuries?
Yeah, because sometimes, like, remember Uncle Matt poked you in the eye by accident and you got hurt, but we didn't have to go to the doctor, right?
No.
So what was different when you broke your arm? Like, how did it feel versus other times when you got hurt in different ways? How did it feel different?
It was less hurtable.
What do you mean by that?
Like less hurt.
It didn't hurt as much as other injuries?
Yeah.
Yeah, like when Uncle Matt poked you in the eye, that didn't hurt as much?
Yeah.
So what was different about when you hurt your wrist, about the pain you felt? Anything?
Not really.
Was it a little more than usual? Were there other feelings?
It was kind of a lot more than usual.
Okay, the whole time, or it was just like a big burst of pain and then you were scared to move it? What would you say?
Burst of pain.
A big burst of pain, and then when it was on your tummy, when you were doing this, did it hurt like that or no?
No, but it made it feel a little comfortable.
Yeah.
All right, and that's also a very common thing with like a break or something like that, is like an initial big pain.
Yeah.
And then, and that's why they'll never forget it, right? Like that will stick in your brain. Like,
Yep.
like when there's a big event or something that happens
Yeah.
emotionally, you'll feel that. But then when she was splinting, it didn't really bother her.
Yep.
She was able to calm down. Now it was, do you remember that word that you were saying? What did it have in it like this that you felt a lot?
Beating?
It was beating, right? Do you remember it beating?
Yeah, it was like putting blood in it so it can make it better.
It was pulsating.
Yeah, but so tell them again, what was that pulsing meaning? What was it doing when it was doing that?
Beating.
Yeah. So what was it bringing there? Did you just say?
Blood.
Yeah. And for what reason?
To make it feel better and protect it.
To make it feel better and protect it. So, right. So like, to me, those, obviously I'm a little crazy, but those concepts to a kiddo, when they're trying to understand why it hurts so much. Interestingly enough, the week before, Julia asked me why some pains are big and some pains are small.
Right.
She's probably a precursor to this, but she, that
And this
beating,
was a big deal.
it was a big deal.
It was a big deal.
And it was beating. So my education to her was, oh, that's so good. Like that is a good thing. It's doing that because it's bringing blood flow and it's helping. It's already starting to heal the bone.
Yep.
In that thought process, I see that in adults a lot. Like if they have an injury and they have like a big bruise, like I just had a woman who had a total knee replacement. Her entire leg was purple, right? Like, or, if you sprain your ankle and it's, black and blue all around, instead of saying, holy cow, look at that bruising, that is awful. That means there's a lot of injury. Oh my goodness. I just say, wow, look at that. It's starting to heal. All of this means that it's bringing blood flow to heal that. And all of that stuff from day one of an injury or post-surgery or anything really frames the patient experience of pain.
And that's, it's just child or adult, right? That's.
But I mean, adult to adult, like from, like even when they're, that's like helping understand, like, okay, that's a good feeling versus be scared of it.
Yep.
But again, you can think about how we were talking a little bit, like if you say to somebody, wow, that is the worst bruising I've ever seen. Like they automatically in their head, they're like, oh God, oh no, this is bad. This is bad. This is bad. Versus like, wow, that bruising, maybe you definitely hurt stuff, but this means that it's healing it. Like this bruising is a great process.
Right. Yeah. The words are so important. Again, for as much as I self-deprecate here on the podcast, I do have somewhat of a background in this stuff. When I was in cardiac rehab, and we had patients in there that had PVCs, premature ventricular contractions, basically when your heart skips a beat. We could see those, and patients who were exercising during a rehab session would come up, and if they knew they had those, they would sometimes they'd want us, they'd be like, hey, which EKG monitor on your computer screen is mine? Because we're watching their EKGs while they work out. It's your obligation to show them which one is theirs. And then when they have a PVC, you're like, okay, that's a PVC right there.
Right.
But we had a nurse who would go, oh, there's one. Oh, there's another one. And I'm like,
right.
Dude, like,
it instills fear and nervous.
And no matter how much you explain that once you do that, no matter how much you explain to the patient, PVCs are very normal. Everyone has them. Some people have them more than often. This is just a byproduct of coming out. They're just worried. And you could speak into existence another problem, so I don't think that changes anywhere in healthcare, but especially with injuries, if you're telling people, because then to get them back to activity, we've talked about this, they're going to be scared.
And I think if nothing else, from an overall picture of pain, it's from day one how you frame things to somebody. A kid, an adult, makes a difference. Because if you instill some type of fear, now, there are people in the world, like I'll generalize here, but if I have rugby players or young, males who just want to go, I can sit there and say, you need to stop because you are going to break your bone more, because they need that direct thing, and they need a little fear because they don't have any.
Right.
Those people scare me more than
Right.
people who are
Yeah.
fearful, because the fearful people, you can usually get out of it.
Yeah.
But the people who have no fear and they're like, I'm fine. Like,
Yeah. It's the Superman
think,
complex, right? Especially
Yeah.
in the younger ones.
This might fit in good here. Like the, I can't remember if we talked about this on a podcast or not, but the acronym of peace and love versus RICE.
Yeah, we touched on it very
We touched
briefly.
on it. So
Yeah.
just to like refresh. So, and in the presence of an injury, most people think of the RICE concept, like rest, ice, compression, elevation. That's been around for years and years and years and years.
Yeah. And that's, you roll your ankle, you hurt your shoulder after playing baseball, you're a pitcher, you ice the shit out of it.
Yep. It's okay.
You ice it a lot.
Yeah.
And that's going to reduce swelling. It's going to reduce inflammation, and that's going to speed up the recovery. Rest, ice, compression, elevation. That was like decades. That was like the best practice.
Right. And like, it's still in, in orthopedic stuff, like if like pre-made handouts about like how to manage your injury, urgent cares, that is what is on their documentation. Yeah. The research of that is old and it's severely outdated, which we had talked about. Yep. So I'm just going through these things, like as I'm, educating Julia when she was going through this. Protection is the first. So it's peace and love, right? So protection, which is
and love.
Thank you. So it's protection, which she was splinting, and then she was casted. Right. So the protection of the injured tissue was important in this case. Right. Elevation, we did the best we could, which was get it up in the air. Yeah. Avoid anti-inflammatories. So did I give you any medicine when you were hurting?
Nope.
Not really. I think I gave her Tylenol at night, like one night. Yeah. Which is a pain reliever.
Gave me a ride home with quiet.
Yeah.
That was kind of medicine.
That was. Oh, did you hear that? It was medicine to take a ride home in the quiet. Yeah. So can you go help her? Yeah. It was medicine to be a ride home in the quiet. So she has 2 twin brothers. So she just, to deal with everything, needed silence. Yeah. And not all this other stuff going around. No. So having the boys not with her was helpful for her to decompress just mentally from that. Yeah. Yeah. Then education. So even though she was little, educating her and just trying to help her understand what was going on. Yep. And then, optimism is one, vascularization. So things heal is another, just staying active, staying moving. We did make a decision in her cast one weekend to go swimming at her friends. Yeah. Full-fledged. We had a thing to go over her arm, and rule number 1 is don't get your cast wet. Right. We made it about 4.5 into 5 hours of swimming. In the last half hour, water went right down. Yeah. And we needed a new cast to protect her skin. So, we made that decision for her psyche versus anything else. But I do think, a lot of times when kids are hurt too, like we take them out of everything, and just like have them be involved. Yes. Protect them from re-injury, whatever you need to do, but still let them be around their friends and stuff like that. So that was optimism of like, you're going to be fine. We don't need to stop everything. Yeah. Right?
That was the last one?
Yeah. So the love is load, optimism, vascularization, and exercise. So,
right. So I want to get to exercise on the last part, especially for kids and adults. But just one note is the anti-inflammatory thing. I mean, even you,
100%.
Even you back, in the past 10 years, I've sprained my ankle quite a bit, and you've helped me a lot with that. And I haven't really sprained it at all. God, I don't know, 5-6 years. Yeah. Man, you just tell me load up on the ibuprofen for 5 days,
and I was wrong, right? Like it actually slows healing down.
Yeah,
and so it slows down the healing process.
Yeah, and I gotta be honest, I don't even take and it's just my personal decision. I don't even know if I have ibuprofen in the house. I don't take it. I get bad sinus headaches. I've hurt myself a few times. My shoulder, you've been helping me with because I banged it playing hoops. I don't take Tylenol. I don't take Advil. I don't take Aleve. Almost any little thing. I just usually kind of hydrate, sleep, rest
Yep.
my way through even like the illness. Save for COVID, I took Tylenol for my fever, but
Yep.
um,
Yep.
I've just like laid off all of that stuff when trying to get over things, and just whatever. I've pulled the trigger on other variables in my life, but I've never felt like healthier in my life waking up.
Absolutely.
And I gotta think that they're just cutting that out, even when I was doing it acutely on a semi-regular basis, hangovers, everything.
Yeah.
Man, cutting that stuff out, I think, has made a world of difference.
Yeah. I mean, it's just become part of this, our society versus, does it actually help you? You know, I mean, I know people that just pop it just proactively so things don't hurt when they go golfing or when they do whatever.
Yeah.
I'm like,
yeah.
Well, what if you didn't take it? You know, like, and they're like, oh no, I can't do that. Well, truly, like, how do you feel if you don't take it? I don't know. I've taken it for 20 years. Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
liver.
there was a very good, I went to a Division III undergrad school. One of the best wide receiver on the team. He was a real small guy. Game day, he'd load up with 12 ibuprofen from 8 in the morning till noon, just to be proactive, because he would take kind of a beating a little bit, but he was throwing the ball so much and he was productive, but he just didn't want to be sore the next day.
Yeah.
So he would just pop 12 ibuprofen over a 4-hour period, like wild. And that's like that. He's not alone. Like, he wasn't a freak for doing that. Like a lot of, especially at sometimes the higher levels. So cutting out the anti-inflammatories is like one of my favorite parts of the peace and love acronym.
Yep, for sure.
Anything to add there, or because I want to talk about the exercise real quick before we kind of maybe wrap up?
What does wrap up?
Finish up.
Wrap up means finish up. Come on, Jay.
I think just, if we want to, I don't know if you want to go exercise first, but just taking Jay all the way through to getting her cast off and where she is today.
Yeah, of course.
So can you tell us, so come back on. I know you're doing great. Can you tell us, so you had a cast on, and then we had to get another cast, right? Because we got it wet.
Yeah.
And then why was it okay to take it off? Do you remember what they had to see in order for her to take it off? What did they do when you went on the day to get your cast off? Did they have to do?
They had to do like a cutty thing and a tickle.
Yeah, that was to take it off. But first they x-rayed it.
Yeah.
Right.
To make sure it's not broken and it's healing good.
Yes.
And
do you remember what the sign on? Did I remember the picture I showed you of the bones? What was the sign that it was healing? Do you remember?
So the first time it had it, like when I got the cast off for like forever, like it was like the other picture for like the last time was better than the other picture.
Yep, it was better. So you saw the line.
So it was like a little bigger on the other one and a little smaller on the other one because it's just starting to heal.
Yeah. And
it might have broken yesterday, and it would, and maybe it could be like, maybe it could be like just maybe the crack could be like moving, so it can just be healing.
Right. And because it was a little smaller, was it when it was smaller and the day they took it off, was your wrist feeling better? Did it still hurt a little bit, or did it feel all the way better?
Feel all the way.
It felt better in that there was no pain, right? What do you remember how it felt though when you took the cast off? What was the word you told me it felt like? Heavy. And why was it heavy? Do you remember why?
Because it was healing.
Because it was healing. But why else was it heavy?
Because I just took the cast off and I haven't been using it for a while.
Yeah.
So maybe it felt a little weak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she's describing it as heavy, right? So, and this is very common, right? I mean, for a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
For a 6-year-old in a cast, or even kids, teenagers that go into a cast for an ankle break or something like that, they don't even bring up physical therapy.
What?
Or
That's
rehab.
Bad.
You're right. Because what did we see when we started to exercise it? Do you remember anything about when we started to do some exercises?
It started to feel way more better.
In what way?
The good way.
Okay.
It didn't feel as heavy, right?
No.
So we tried, so we did some.
So we like did gorilla thing. And we like mom did this high five and the other one stays down. But sometimes I just fell over and sometimes I stayed up.
Yep. So she was in like,
But it was more tricky on my left hand.
So sometimes we started with like,
And I got these play things. Like play.
yeah. So we got some hand stuff. So we were just doing let her, and as a 6-year-old, I didn't really like guide sessions, right?
Right.
Like, but I gave her opportunities to use it in ways. So like she had things that she could squeeze or pull or play with or whatever.
Even squeeze with the thumb on the other side.
Yep. So gave her simple cues and just gave it to her.
Good
Right.
news, I was a lefty though.
It was good news. So and then I think the hardest, then we tried to hang on the bar, right? Which was hard at first, right?
Yeah, but then in like a few days when I was like playing on the playground with my friend Tanner, when I went on the monkey bars, when we were like kind of going home but staying there for a little bit, I was like getting it and it was like working out.
Yeah.
Right. You were getting it stronger.
So giving that opportunity to make it stronger, right? Where again, like kind of jumping right back to getting her exercise and moving, being a kid, use it, let her body guide that. You know, during the days that we tried stuff where she was trying the monkey bars, if she couldn't do it, she didn't do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing for, carry over to adults is, did we give them too many cues? We just tell them too many things versus like try to use it.
Do.
Right now I have a horse farmer. He's a polo player, and he had a grade 3 AC joint separation in his shoulder, and he didn't come to see me till about 8 weeks because somebody was like, "You really, go see her. You see what she says." And he came in and he had the best range of motion. He was super strong.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Well, what'd you do?" He's like, "I don't know. I just started working back on the farm and did what I could." I was like, "You don't even need me. Like, let's talk about something else. What else do you got going on?" Because he did the things. He did farmer's carries. He has to pull up at horses. So in the beginning, he was doing it where he was lifting with the one arm and helping with the other arm. And then the day that the other arm could go up, he was like, "Oh, check this out." And then it would get sore a little bit and he'd stop. So he did his own rehab on the farm for 8 weeks. And I think that's for like the kids. Do they need structured rehab? Obviously I'm a PT. I think there's good good things for like guiding them.
Until it's my turn.
Sure. Yep. It's good for like guiding them and like helping them see something. You're fine. Thank you.
Wait, am I doing bad?
It's okay.
You're doing great, Julia.
You're doing great, Jay. It's like you're giving them the opportunity and like you don't have to totally guide them with everything, but you give them, the ability to understand what to do. So for her, the biggest thing that she probably would have avoided for a long time because she's 6 and, she does still get on the ground, but, she's not doing like hands and knees anymore, like all the time.
Right.
So when we put her kind of like, I said, go on your hands and knees like a dog, and like she said, I had her give me like a high five. When she gave me the high five with her right hand, it was fine. When she went to go do it on the left hand, she fell over. Like she couldn't support her weight on her right arm. Right. So now you get crazy Alice in mind of like, okay, if she doesn't get that back, she doesn't get the weight bearing back, that affects her shoulder blade, that affects her shoulder, that affects everything moving forward if she doesn't reinsert that into her life. So, again, I didn't like go crazy with that, but I did say you should crawl around a little bit. You should try to go around and, keep your right hand down and pet Roy and, do other things like that.
Right.
So
did she do it?
She can do it now. Yep. But she would compensate, like she would go like this versus like use her wrist.
Yeah.
And
that's okay. And that would be okay, right? Because she's
using it. Yep.
And
then I want to provide. Go ahead.
She's easing her way back into normal, but she's doing what the body can tolerate, just like the farmer was kind of reaching up before he felt comfortable too, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That compensation doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It's like you're just doing what the body's capable of.
Yeah. I mean, I think, if it's compensation from a protection side now, if you have the mindset of like, I am consciously not going to use it.
Yeah.
Because it hurts. That's not true. Like when you
Yeah,
start moving
yeah.
something, right? It's okay to feel it if it stops and you stop.
Yep.
That's, back to previous episodes, kind of like that traffic light analogy. If you feel a little bit of pain, 0 to 3, and it stops and you stop, that's a green light. 4, 5, 6, think about it. How's it feel? If it's worse or feels in your gut, it's not good or safe, then back off. We
Right.
want, I want it to be fun. I want it to be positive.
Yeah.
And so for her, when she was doing that, it was fun. She was laughing when she was falling over.
Right.
So
Right.
then we just said like, okay, let's go to a different position. So we went like in a press up, like on her belly.
Yeah.
And she could do it a little better. And then
Yep.
and then she just naturally worked on it on her own.
Yeah.
Or like made it aware. So, the fact that, I walk a line of like, I don't think everybody needs rehab all the time, because I think they can figure it out. But I do think like a session or two to just become aware of where your weaknesses have built so that you can undo them.
Yeah. And that's going to be way more impactful and important with adults than kids. Because,
though, I mean, no, I don't think so. I think in our preteen / adolescence, this is a major issue that, we could go on forever, because I see it every day. A kid goes in a walking boot for an ankle sprain, or is on crutches for 2 to 3 days.
Yeah.
They don't, they get out, they go to the doctor looks at it, says, oh, you're good. They don't get rehab. They go out, then they suddenly hurt their knee on that side. And then they suddenly pull their, feel their back or tear their ACL.
Yeah.
And then you start questioning, they did sprain their ankle a year ago. Did you have rehab for it? No. So guess what? They lost their shock. They lost their foot, because they're going to go back to what they're doing without that. So no, I think this impacts our kids significantly.
Yeah, because I guess where I was going with that is the cues. The adults need, we cue our adults more than the kids. You know what I mean? The kids, you can just say, go mess around. You can just say, go mess around, do this, and just let them kind of figure it out, versus adults wanted me. I'm classic. I mean, you see, I always want to do it right.
Right.
So I'm like just thinking, and you are good enough with adults to take the thinking out of it.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, just do that. But so that's more what I was getting. It's not that the kids don't need the rehab, but the manner in which you do it is more general direction of giving them permission to try things.
Yep.
Versus, hey, do this routine of rehab. And I don't know if that.
Yep. So it versus being super duper structured. I mean, were there times I'd say, come on, do some of this stuff? Sure. Like with her, like I'd like grab that, do a few, whatever.
Yeah.
But I think making it playful. But I also think that's important with adults.
I was going to say,
right. The more fun it is. So, you put a ball on your back and say, don't drop it. It's more fun.
It's my favorite thing.
You're fine. Do this, move that, do that, because that's too much shit for our brains to, I'm sorry.
You bad girl.
I know it's too much for our brains to process. It's way too much for us to process. And
can people please stop saying bad words in here? Thank you.
I think it was Eric Cressy, just had a post up. I don't know if you know him or not, but he's big in the rehab and sports world. But he had a post up about learning from kindergartners. And it was exactly that. Like if they're in a clean, neat environment, they learn much better. If you start doing all sorts of stuff around them, it's harder for them to learn. So it's the same as we get older. The more stuff you put in, the harder it is to get the result that you want. So, being very simplistic, can you get your hand from here to here? No. Yep. Can you, can you tap my hand? Can you put the ball on your back? Right. Can you, get that stick before it drops? Like doing different things that just make it fun. And the thinking out.
Yeah. Gamification, you call it, right?
Think about movement.
You call it gamification.
Gamification, correct.
Yeah. And it feels, you've exposed me to a ton of people in the industry. It feels like Craig Levinson's like one of the dudes that like next level
every time.
He's like next level on that stuff. And his posts on it are great. And it's just like so simple, but it just shows like even the professionals overthink it, right? Like they want to say the words perfectly so that you do exactly what they say. And it's just like, no, just, you got to give the human the ability to figure it out on their own. It's kind of a metaphor for freaking society right now.
Yeah, right. But
You got to save yourself.
Exactly. So it's just, I mean, it's, and we've, hammered at this in the past, but it's taking it from school and book learning to
Application.
And actually the more clinical experience you get, the more nitty gritty you can get, but you stop. Right. So, if you had a very technical patient that likes the technicalities, you should be able to go there if you need to. Yep. Right. So versus if you have the, this is happening right now on our
What the
podcast.
heck are you doing?
I just lost my camera. What am I doing? What are you doing? I forgot I had the camera on here. Okay. So so if you take the technicalities out and you
Good.
Okay. So like when it's like you can get technical. So if you have somebody who's an elite athlete who has good foundations of movement, which this happens. I mean, this does happen. Like you can have really good foundations, and then you have to get nitty gritty. Then you have to, find these little things that you might otherwise miss. And you might have to talk about, shoulder external rotation in the scapular plane, or I don't know. I'm just making that up.
Whatever.
But, but you might have to go there in order to get them better.
Got it.
Generally, most people, that is not the case. You have to go stop the technicalities.
Yep.
Oh, very good, Julia. Yep. Very
nice.
Strong.
Kettlebell action. We love it here at the Body Movement. That's our logo.
Very strong.
Okay. So this has been good. So I think always a quick recap is one with kids and let's say acute traumatic injuries is just use common sense. Assess whether they can kind of dust it off, but if it was obviously a dramatic event from a far height or a very big thing, you'll want to get them assessed right away versus just monitoring over a certain amount of time. Minimizing your words and just maybe more asking questions of how they feel and not like babying them.
Don't affect their experience.
Let them
have their experience.
Yeah. And I think that
there to support, be empathetic. Be there to support, be empathetic, but don't force your experience on them.
Yep. And I think that's always, and then the peace and quiet that she said felt like medicine in the car. I felt that was really important because I'm sure it relates to a lot of people. Like our family, we have big get-togethers and somebody gets hurt and I'll run over, you'll run over, dad run over, grandma and grandpa run over, and they're getting all this attention. A totally negative feedback loop there. So like the peace and quiet to let them be alone with that and experience it with maybe one or two people, just asking good questions occasionally is
everybody's different, right? I mean, the pain experience is a very personal thing. So, and my three kids are all very different.
Yeah.
One will run and hide and want to be alone.
Right.
One will scream bloody murder, want to be held, but then doesn't want me to hold them. They just want me to sit next to them. Yep. And the other one will just climb right up in fetal position with me. Yep. Their experiences are different, and I feel it's my job as a parent to let them find their way and be there, but don't push them one way or the other.
Yep. And then just monitoring the way that they move and behave. If they're doing something visibly different immediately, you'll probably want to be more likely to go check that out versus giving it the 24, 48 hour period to see if they kind of recover.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. And then what else? We do rice is overrated. No ice.
Rice is not effective.
Yeah, it's not effective. Peace and love, protect the injury, start using it right away. Don't rely on drugs and just kind of get back to normal activity at a smart pace testing different things, but not being too anal about it.
Yep. Yep.
Mhm.
Follow your lead, like dig down and
Yeah.
see how your body feels. Like don't,
Yeah.
pain, being pain-free for anything isn't really the goal. It's function.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
listen to it. And if it feels, and most people do, like if most people are working through certain things, it's until we start to medicalize it and make them fearful of any little, finger pang that then they start to get worried,
Yeah.
right? To your point, if you always run to get an x-ray or an MRI, like on any injury,
Yeah.
and, in kids, it's not as much of an issue as it is in adults when we have things show up on images.
Right.
So if we do something we're not sure, and then we have like some incidental arthritis shown up,
Yeah.
then suddenly, guess what? My wrist hurts more than it has because I know I have this arthritis. So now we medicalize something
Yep.
that really
Yeah.
didn't deserve an x-ray because now we're exposed to radiation, and now we're going down this rabbit hole of radiation exposure.
Yeah.
That
Yep.
does to, which we don't need to go
Yeah.
to.
So try and again, it's the human body is meant to move. It's resilient. It's pain tolerant. It works through things. It recovers on its own. We just want to put ourselves in the best position to optimize that experience and maybe do some things that will help you be more confident on the road to recovery versus quote unquote fixing, which we know we don't do here.
Right. We do it in by ourselves. Things like casting isn't fixing, it's providing the environment in which it can heal.
Yep.
So it's putting it in a place
Exactly.
where, it's not realistic for my 6-year-old to walk around like this. Now she might, and but we've seen that overall you're doing great. Okay. So it's think about, things like, even if you have like a surgical repair, it's not fixed at that point. It's the tissues have been approximated in order to allow healing to occur.
Right.
So your body is still healing it. The pin, if you had pins and stuff like that in a fracture, you approximated the tissues to heal.
Yep.
It's not, you did.
Yep.
So.
Very good stuff. And obviously exercise and movement are just always a part of this. So, I think this was helpful. I think, why we focused on Julie's experience in kids, it certainly applies to adults, and it's just a level of detail and the communication, which is obviously going to be different communicating to a 6-7-year-old what you do. They're not even usually go through formal rehab.
Yeah.
But the words and the process and the psychology are the same, just applied with different verbiage and level of sophistication. But all right.
And a plug from the rehab side, if your kid has been injured and not, you can always ask the physician what they think.
Yeah.
And if they know, you can always seek it yourself.
Yep.
So I have people all the time. I had a guy the other day that said, I've been waiting for somebody to tell me to go to physical therapy. It's like, no, go yourself. You make that choice. You don't need somebody to tell you that. So advocate for yourself, allow yourself to heal, and rock on.
Built on developing yourself. We are about the individual here. Okay. Why don't we bring our special guest, Julia, back on camera?
Oh, Julia.
Okay.
Can you come say goodbye to everybody? Because you are our special guest.
Yeah. So
Bye, everybody. Bye, Uncle Matt.
Hey, Julia, thanks for coming on our show.
You're welcome.
Hey, can you tell everybody to like and subscribe down below?
Like and subscribe down low.
Thank you. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. There's my niece, Julia Jordan Davis, our special guest on Body Movement, episode 30. We'll see you next time, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Will I be the next one, Mom?
Yeah, you're going to be on. We're going to release it to everybody.